Introducing Connect at Singapore, a new travel lane and accommodation for high-value visitors who won't have to quarantine when they get here. What you need to know about getting vaccinated against COVID-19, we'll speak to an expert who's on Singapore's vaccines committee. And a Japanese serial killer who murdered 9 people in a span of 3 months is sentenced to death. Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Well, 16 new COVID-19 cases confirmed in Singapore today. 15 were imported and placed on stay-home notices on arrival. There was also 1 new case from a worker dormitory. The Health Ministry will share more details tonight. Meanwhile, Manpower Minister Josephine Teo said restrictions on workers returning to offices may be relaxed in Phase 3. Announcements on this will be made in the near future. There will be a new travel arrangement next month for official and business travellers from all countries. They won't have to be quarantined but must spend their entire visit in dedicated facilities. Multimedia correspondent Yo Sam Jo has the details.
From the second half of January, short-term business travellers arriving in Singapore from all countries will no longer need to be quarantined. Because under new segregated travel lane arrangements, travellers using the lane will be transported directly from the airport to dedicated facilities, where they will stay and work for the entire duration of their visit. Regular testing will be conducted throughout their stay, in addition to PCR tests before departing from their home countries and upon arrival here. Official and high economic value travellers are included in this Connected Singapore scheme. Trade and Industry Minister Chan Chun Sing said the new measures will make Singapore more relevant as a business hub amid the unpredictability of COVID-19.
This particular scheme, Connect at Singapore, is really targeted at short-term travellers who do not have an intention to stay more than 2 weeks in Singapore, but allow them to come in here to meet the Singaporeans safely without the previous 14 days quarantine. For example, some of the companies, they would like to have their regional managers all to come and meet because they feel that there's a difference between just meeting over Zoom and having an offsite in Singapore. So it's not just for a few hours, it could be for a few days whereby they need to discuss things in more detail. They need to see each other's in person to understand the body language and establish new connections. So there is a certain niche demands for this kind of services that goes beyond the Zoom services. So for many of the financial services, legal services, I think our feedback is that there are people who would like to meet their clients on site to see them in person before they do the transaction. And this is very important for a financial hub like Singapore.
Mr. Chan added that his ministry will study the demand for this travel lane to assess the number of dedicated facilities needed, with the possibility of the lane being widened for medical or family visiting purposes. One of the facilities that will be used to house these short-term travellers is Connect at Changi, at Singapore Expo and Max Atria, a 5-minute drive from Changi Airport. The 4-star accommodation will implement safe management measures such as separate ventilation systems for guests and Singapore-based visitors, as well as airtight glass panels in meeting rooms. When fully constructed in mid-2021, Connect at Changi will have more than 1,300 guest rooms and some 340 meeting rooms. Accommodation rates range from $390 to $430 a night for stays shorter than 3 days and cover coronavirus testing, meals and airport transfers. The Ministry of Trade and Industry plans to appoint additional facilities in the coming weeks. The segregated travel lane is separate from existing reciprocal green lane arrangements, which apply only to selected countries and allow those on essential business or official purposes to move around more freely in Singapore. Applications for the Connect at Singapore scheme will open in the middle of January, with the first travellers expected to arrive later that month.
Well, biotech company Moderna has confirmed a supply agreement with the Health Ministry for its COVID-19 vaccine. The volume of doses and financial details of the deal were not disclosed, but the first vaccine that the Health Sciences Authority here has approved is the one from Pfizer and BioNTech. Well, that vaccine is based on messenger RNA technology. The new technology hasn't been approved for any other vaccine so far and needs to be capped at -70 degrees Celsius or below, based on the supply deal with the US. The price tag amounts to $39 or 52 Singapore dollars for a 2-dose course given 3 weeks apart. Now, BioNTech CEO has said he's optimistic that the immunization effect of the vaccine would last for a year, but scientists don't yet know how long the effect will last. Well, based on Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong's announcements yesterday, we know that COVID-19 vaccinations will be free for all Singaporeans and long-term residents who are currently here. And the entire adult population will be offered vaccinations on a voluntary basis. The first shipment of vaccine should arrive by the end of this month, with other vaccines expected in the coming months. There will be enough vaccines for everyone here by the third quarter of next year if all goes according to plan. Well, I'm pleased to welcome Associate Professor Lim Po Lian to share more on Singapore's vaccination plan. She's the head of the Travellers Health and Vaccination Clinic at Tan Tock Seng Hospital, a senior consultant at the National Centre for Infectious Diseases, as well as a member of the Ministry of Health's Expert Committee on COVID-19 vaccination. Welcome, Professor. So, getting vaccinated for COVID-19 is voluntary, as we learned yesterday, but what happens if the take-up rate of vaccination is low?
Well, COVID-19 vaccination is voluntary because we understand that people don't want to be forced to do things. But if the take-up rate of vaccination is low, then it's possible that clusters of COVID infection can form, especially as we gradually open up. And if any of the outbreaks get large enough to start spread in the community, then we may end up being forced into a lockdown again, as has happened in other countries, even those that did well in the first wave. So you only have to read the newspapers to know that it can happen, and it's happening right now. So the whole of government has worked very hard to get access to these vaccine supplies. And the best minds around the world have scrutinized the scientific and medical evidence to make sure that the vaccines are really safe, effective, and of good quality before vaccinating, before recommending it for use. So it would be really sad if all that work and resources are wasted if people in Singapore don't get vaccinated when the vaccines we have bought become available.
Well, PM Lee also said yesterday that he and other cabinet members will get vaccinated to allay the public's fears about the vaccine. What would you say to those still worried about safety?
Well, I'd say that it's completely understandable that people have concerns about safety with a new vaccine like this. As you know, other COVID vaccines have been deployed in various countries around the world. We've chosen to wait until the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine cleared HSA's extremely meticulous review for safety, efficacy, and quality before recommending the vaccine for Singaporeans. The risk from the vaccine is not zero, but this vaccine is considered safe, good quality, and effective. So I'll be taking the vaccine myself as soon as it's offered to my group, because I've personally examined the data, I know the uncertainties, and I'm convinced that the vaccine makes good sense.
Well, okay, but besides safety, Prof, what are some other considerations the public needs to be aware of as Singapore starts its vaccination program?
Well, the most important consideration is vaccine efficacy. We're in the middle of the pandemic of a century. The last time we saw an infectious pandemic of this magnitude was really the 1918 flu. The scientific and medical communities around the world and governments have invested a tremendous amount of resources to developing these vaccines. And they work, they are highly effective. For the Pfizer vaccine, in the placebo group, there were 162 COVID cases compared to 8 in the vaccinated group, counting 7 days from after the second dose of vaccine. So there were also more severe cases in the placebo group compared to those who got vaccinated. The other practical consideration is how we manage the common side effects of vaccination. When Singapore starts to roll out its vaccination program, we will need to take turns in getting the vaccine within the target groups. Although the vaccine is safe, the vaccine also, like other vaccines, have common side effects like tiredness, muscle aches, headache, pain or redness at the injection site, and even fever. These are usually mild and will usually get better within 2 or 3 days. But with fever can happen in up to 14% or 1 in 7 people. And since we're all checking temperatures and trying to be responsible if we get sick, resting and getting tested if necessary, we will have to factor that into our work schedules so that not everyone goes and gets vaccinated at the same time.
Right. Well, Prof, given the low community spread in Singapore currently, some might choose to wait before getting vaccinated. What's your advice for those with that mindset who are thinking of waiting?
Well, people certainly have a right to wait before taking vaccine. But when you get vaccinated, you're protecting not just yourself, but also people you love and those you provide care for. So by waiting, you are continuing to put yourself and others at risk. So it's a little bit like hearing about a computer virus going around and saying, I think I can delay getting my antivirus updated. To vaccinate over 5 million people in Singapore over the next year is already a huge task. If Singapore gets hit by a second wave of COVID and goes into lockdown again, people may be convinced by then that vaccine is needed, but by then the health systems will be extremely busy and it will be much harder to get a lot of people vaccinated and to do it safely.
I see. Well, when the vaccination program is rolled out, do you think there's a need to change our testing strategy?
Well, I think we're going to have to examine how vaccination will make a difference around the world, especially in countries with a lot of active and widespread COVID transmission. There are a lot of different considerations which we will take into aboard as we consider our testing strategies. There's just a lot of questions about how this will get rolled out, so we will just have to see.
I see. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Prof. Lim. I've been speaking to Associate Professor Lim Po Lian, Head of the Travellers Health and Vaccination Clinic at Tan Tock Seng Hospital. Prof. Lim is also a member of the MOH's Expert Committee on COVID-19 vaccination. In other local news, it will not be mandatory for children to have their Trace Together tokens when they return to school next year. Minister of State for Education Sun Xueling posted on Facebook today that the tokens will only be required in schools when all of them have been distributed nationwide. According to Education Ministry guidelines, all individuals aged 7 and above are required to use either the Trace Together token or app in schools, but students will still be allowed to enter in the event that they misplace or forget their token or don't have the app on their phones. Meanwhile, Secondary 1 posting results will be released next Tuesday, December 22nd at 9 a.m. Students can access them through SMS, the S1 internet system, or at their primary school. They don't need to report to their new schools in person the day after receiving their results. Instead, they should refer to their posted schools' websites from the 22nd for information regarding the purchase of books and uniforms, book lists, as well as the reporting details. Singapore and Australia's defence ministers welcomed steady progress made in the development of training areas in Queensland. This on the occasion of the Singapore Armed Forces' 30th anniversary of training there. In a joint statement, both ministers reaffirmed the growing bilateral defence relationship and their shared commitment to a peaceful, inclusive and resilient region with ASEAN at its core. Well, supermarkets have been singled out as a major culprit of food waste for throwing out perfectly edible food because of poor inventory management like over-ordering or cosmetic filtering. Compared with conventional markets, though, online grocer Redmart doesn't need to stock up shelves across dozens of stores. It also can see an aggregation of consumer demand and predict orders more accurately. Well, in partnership with DBS Bank, the Sunday Times goes inside Redmart's warehouse for the 4th episode in this 6-part Live More, Waste Less series.
Every day, close to 5,000 products arrive from various suppliers across the island at the Redmart warehouse. The products are put in 3 different zones: frozen foods, fresh foods, or dry goods.
We've got 9 years worth of data for our customer patterns, their preferences, the seasonality of particular products or particular categories across the course of the year. So for example, Christmas right now, we'll see an increase in root vegetables. So your traditional Christmas dinner is roasted vegetables, roasted parsnips, roasted carrots, potatoes. Moving into CNY, we'll see a lot of the Asian greens, black fungus, the more hot pot related products as well. So we've really got that level of data that we can share with our suppliers.
When a customer's order comes in, it's divided into 3 separate baskets according to temperature zones. At each zone's picking station, Staff put ordered items into the baskets.
So our produce here in the warehouse is only touched by one person, and that's the person that picks your order. If you consider that in a store environment, you could have a number of people picking up your products, picking, choosing, squeezing, and putting it back. So that enables us to make sure that there's no wastage on the shelf.
Once the order is completed, the items will be packed in their respective zones and are sent to Red Mart's fulfillment centres in the northern, southern, or eastern areas of Singapore. There, frozen foods, fresh foods, and dry goods ordered by each customer will be compiled and delivered to their designated doorstep that same day.
You can read more on Red Mart's efforts at the Live More Waste Less series on the Straits Times website. The first 3 parts of the series are in this link as well. Well, let's take a quick look at the global headlines. Malaysian Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin's first federal budget cleared a final hurdle to be ratified by Parliament today after surviving a parliamentary vote with 111 MPs voting in favour of it. The 322.5 billion ringgit budget, the country's biggest ever, will now be sent to the Upper House to be ratified before coming into effect. Upper House approvals, though, are generally a formality. In a high-profile case that has gripped Japan, a serial killer who murdered 9 people after contacting them on Twitter has been sentenced to death. Takahiro Shiraishi lured suicidal women to his home where he drugged, robbed, raped and killed them before dismembering their bodies. His home was dubbed by Japanese media as the House of Horrors. The 9 murders took place over 3 months in 2017. A new NHK poll in Japan showed that a majority oppose holding the Tokyo Olympics next year despite the imminent arrival of vaccines. 31% of people polled favored a further delay, while 32% wanted an outright cancellation. 27% supported holding the Games next year. Olympic organizers and Japanese officials have ruled out any further delay, insisting the Games can be held even if the pandemic is not under control by the new opening date of July 23rd. Well, Joe Biden has been confirmed by the Electoral College as the next U.S. president, winning 306 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 232. With Mr. Trump still alleging that the election was rigged, Mr. Biden spoke about his victory, saying that the rule of law and the will of the people have prevailed.
In America, politicians don't take power. People grant power to them. The flame of democracy was lit in this nation a long time ago. And we now know nothing, not even a pandemic or an abuse of power, can extinguish that flame.
Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. Thanks so much for watching.